You mentioned earlier stopping the behavior for, was it 4 weeks? And is that what dopamine fasting is? Is that essentially,
Yes. Hmm.
tell me more about that, because easier said than done. Oh, just stop your addictive behavior for a month. Like, okay, I hadn't thought about that before getting arrested twice or getting caught by my wife or whatever, right?
Yeah. Yes, I mean, much easier said than done. But what I hope is that once people understand what's going on in our brains, they will be more motivated to give it a try, whether with a substance or behavior that they know they have a problem with, or maybe a substance or behavior that they are not sure, or they even don't think they have a problem with, but maybe other people have commented that it's a problem. Giving it up for 4 weeks is about the average amount of time it takes to reset dopamine reward pathways. So to have those metaphorical gremlins hop off the pain side of the balance and have homeostasis be restored. And the reason that it's important to do that is because, number one, when we reset reward pathways, we're able to take joy in other more modest rewards again. And number two, we're able to look back at the impact of our drug use on our lives with more objective clarity. Because when we're in it, because of things like delayed discounting and losing a sense of space-time, we really aren't very good judges of the true impact of our use on our lives. It's only when we get some distance. I've often had patients who will come back after 4 weeks of abstaining and be shocked to look back at their former selves and how much energy and time and money they invested in chasing their drug. So it's really important to take a break, to give your brain a break. Even if after that break you decide you want to go back to using, which many of our patients do, but they almost all universally want to use differently. They want to use less. They want to have a different kind of attachment to their drug of choice, a healthier attachment. So I think it's a really important and well-informed experiment that people can just do, in their lives. Now, importantly, this is not something I would recommend for somebody who was so severely addicted that they could never stop on their own, right? They had repeatedly tried and just couldn't do it. Or somebody who was at risk for life-threatening withdrawal from a substance like alcohol or a benzodiazepine like Xanax or an opioid. Those are people who need a higher level of care, who need...
You can die if you stop taking those? I didn't realize that you could die from that.
Yes. So specifically alcohol and benzodiazepines like Xanax, Valium, Klonopin in particular, if you become very physiologically dependent, so you really change your brain physiology with repeated use, if you stop suddenly, you can experience a profound physiologic storm that can lead to death. In some instances, you can have seizures and you can die. So
Wow.
for those kinds of drugs, people really need to see a medical professional and to be monitored and potentially get medicines to help them withdraw.
Wow, I had no idea that could happen. Is that just you? Well, that's a different conversation. That's really incredible. I think a lot of people, unfortunately, they just trade one addiction for another. I remember I went to a bunch of these meetings like NA and AA just to see what they were like, because I was giving advice on my show and I was like, I should probably know what I'm recommending. And I had friends that were in there like, yeah, come with me. So I noticed that, for example, with AA, a ton of people were smoking and vaping outside of the
Hmm.
meeting. And
Right.
I'm not trying to be judgy here, but it really seemed like a lot of the people had went from either smoking and drinking or just drinking, and now they're just smoking a lot or vaping a lot. And I wondered how many people just traded one addiction for another one.
Well, I mean, this concept of cross addiction is really important because people with addiction who give up one drug are very vulnerable to increased use of another drug, or even take on a new drug, or switch to a behavior and engage in that behavior in an addictive way. So we always talk about the risk of cross addiction. But I do want to emphasize that, in our work with patients, when we talk about dopamine fasting, we're not asking patients to necessarily give up every single drug or vice, quote unquote, vice that they have. We're really asking them to identify that substance or that behavior that is causing problems in their lives, and to really focus on that one. If their use of alcohol is, for example, linked to their use of cigarettes, like, every time they smoke a cigarette, they want to drink, but otherwise they don't want to drink, then we might say, well, geez, maybe you should give up the cigarettes and the alcohol at the same time. And in fact, there are a few studies showing that when people give up cigarettes and alcohol at the same time, they actually have better outcomes for both than if they try to give up one but not the other. And the hypothesis there is that as long as you're using anything that sort of pings your reward pathway, you're kind of setting yourself up for relapse, because all rewarding substances and behaviors work on the same final common pathway. They all release dopamine in the reward circuitry. But now, having said that, if somebody identifies in their life that like alcohol is super destructive to themselves and others, et cetera, but that nicotine, although yes, obviously harmful for health, is something that that they want to keep doing, we support patients in that. It's good that they're willing to give up the one substance, even if they're going to continue the other. We just really caution them against not increasing use of the other. And then over time, we will maybe re-enter the discussion like, well, you've been able to stop drinking. You're doing so much better. Do you want to take a look at quitting smoking or quitting cigarettes? What's very interesting is when people use cannabis and nicotine, they will almost always tell you that they want to quit smoking cigarettes, but they almost never want to quit cannabis because, cannabis is their medicine. So you have these funny cultural overlays too of sort of what's healthy, what's a medicine, what's a drug, what's addictive, what isn't.
I know we talked about things like weed and food becoming more and more potent. I know for the last 20, 30, whatever years, there's been a lot of manipulation of drug formulation. Even Breaking Bad, right, was about the super methamphetamine. I don't know if you saw that series, but
no, but my sons absolutely love that series.
Well,
so
yeah, you might enjoy it. I mean,
I'm sure I would. Yeah, I'm sure I would.
With all the free time you have.
Yeah.
But I won't say it beats vampire porn, but it's pretty damn good.
I bet it's way up there. Yeah.
I know that law enforcement is also concerned about this. It's been a significant factor in the explosion of mental illness and homelessness in America, according to some of the sources that I saw. Just drugs being crazy, crazy potent, methamphetamine and things like that. Do you believe that there are some substances which are so disruptive to the brain that recovery is impossible or highly improbable? Or is that too catastrophic for us?
So I always believe that recovery is possible. I have seen people with very severe addictions after decades of use get into recovery. So there's always hope. Recovery is always possible. We need to never give up on people. But it is true that the longer that people use their drug of choice and the more potent that drug, the more potential damage to the brain, which is the ultimate end organ that is being damaged by addictive drugs and behaviors. Fentanyl is the perfect example. It's a highly potent opioid, 50 to 100 times more potent than heroin. It's available cheaply on the streets of every major city. It's also very lethal because it slows down heart rate, slows down breathing. People fall asleep and don't wake up again. People aren't using it for that reason. They're using it for its, psychotropic effects or euphorogenic effects, but they accidentally overdose. So, obviously these really potent drugs, which, by the way, are, a result of our scientific revolution, right? It's the dark side of technology and innovation that's allowed us to manufacture drugs that are this incredibly potent.